So I just decided to make something for us Janome Mb4 users. So that's what I decided to do. And I like the shape of the purse because it's a more pleasing rectangle. It's more usable. It's really nice shape to even put on your hip. And you can put tabs on it or not with D-rings for keys or anything you want to hang on there. Or you can use those D-rings to hook on your belt loops with, you know, some other types of hooks. You can get these hooks. I don't really like these hooks, but, you know, you can find them anywhere. And the other thing I use is that Velcro that doesn't snag fabric. You can buy it at Joann's. And I just stick that through here and then put that on my belt loops. And it's really nice and flat and smooth, and it stays. And this purse is fully lined. And there's no raw seams or anything like that. And you don't have to put the top tabs on. If you do put the top tabs, you can use this as a crossbody purse. So, and this is just a leather pull I made from some leather scraps I had from making the tabs, actually. I had these strips of leather left over. So, it's basically a monogram purse. This is my stitch that I created. It's like a double back stitch. You don't have to use any of this, but you can. And you can, you know, delete out my monogram in the center and put in your own monogram, or you can put any other type of design you want in the center. So this is one where the center last name is made larger, and, you know, just different ideas. This one is actually the best one that is stitched out with this quilting design that I created, because I had to edit this stitch a couple times before I was really happy with it. So this will be what yours will look like. So I did think about possibly taking this right here and flipping it so that it went up here, so that you could make this middle letter bigger without it interfering with the points. So, and the tabs can be either the D-rings. You'll notice these D-rings are the wider ones, the 1-inch D-rings, whereas this one is the 3/4 inch. So there's placement lines to place either or. So if you're using the smaller D-rings, you'll just trim the tabs 1/8 of an inch from the stitching. If you're using the 1 inch, you'll trim the tabs 1/4 of an inch from the outer stitching lines, these two outer stitching lines. And there's, you know, everything is placement lines for either one. So, and this one, of course, has a strap attached to it for a crossbody. This is not a strap I made. This just came from a person. Everybody has these, but you can make your own strap as well. And, you know, they're real easy. And I could probably make a tutorial on that, but there's so many of those tutorials out there. So, at any rate, so those are just some samples of the purse. And that off to the side. The supplies that you'll need will be your outer fabric, and I'm using denim. You can use anything you want, even soft leather if you want. And, you know, vinyl or leather or anything. But there's a small, a medium, and a large piece. And you'll have the same exact measurements for your lining, a small, a medium, and a large. And I starched everything. You can iron on interfacing on the back, or you can put batting on the back. We'll get to the batting stage later. You can iron on fusible fleece if you want at this point. But I like it soft, so I'll show you how I do that, how I like to do it. And this is just stitch and tear. And I am going to be getting some stitch and tear light because, I don't know, it's just from everything I've read, it's easier to tear at the zipper. But I don't know. I mean, this is working okay, but we'll see. So we'll use that, and we'll also be using, well, before we do that, this is loose because I have hooped some wash away. This is Vilene. It's for freestanding lace, but you can get wash and gone from Joann's. So your first hooping will be this wash away because this is where your leather tabs are going to go on. And then we're going to wash the back of it and let it dry while we work on the rest of the purse. So that's your wash away, and I know this is incorrect here. I ran out of the correct size. You can't use your M2 hoop for the tabs. It's just not big enough. So you'll have to hoop your M1 hoop twice, or if you have a 9x9 Durkee hoop, or if I have two of these now because I just bought this cheaper version of the M1. This will be the first time I'm using it. So, anyways, so you'll hoop the wash away, and you'll need your leather for your tabs, and you can, if you have scraps of leather like I did, you'll be cutting them in 4 strips like this. If I have dimensions also, if you have like say 2 and 2, I have dimensions for that, or I have dimensions where you're cutting them all in one piece. So it depends on what you have on hand, and of course you can use vinyl or faux leather. These are real leather. And at least about a 12-inch zipper, and bigger if that's what you have on hand. And this is a nylon zipper, of course. And these are my D-rings, 4 of them. This is cutaway. It's poly mesh cutaway, and this particular one is just soft and sheer. And I'm going to use this cutaway underneath my design. You'll see when we get to that point. I'm going to tear out the stitch and tear under the design, and then I'm going to tape this underneath the hoop and then stitch around all the way around to try to just pretty much float it under there. And then this is going to stay in permanently under the design instead of the stitch and tear, because like I kind of don't like it. Let's see which one has this one. I mean, it's fine. Some people like it. It's got the stitch and tear under it, and you can hear it. It's kind of, you know, it's stiff, and you can hear it underneath, even though you don't see it. So I decided I didn't want to have that, but some people might like it. So it all depends on what you like. This one has the soft and sheer under it. So it's still stabilized well, and the stitching took it very well, probably because this is denim. So, and it's nice and soft inside. So, anyways, so that's all our supplies that we'll need. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch our leather tabs. And so I'll put the hoop in the machine and we'll stitch the placement lines. I am going to try to follow the directions so that you're not confused. Down at the bottom it says for stabilizer, you can use tear away like stitch and tear or stitch and tear light if you like tearing away cleanly at the zipper and don't mind a stiffer, crinkly embroidery. That's if you leave it in. And if you don't mind, if you like tearing away at the zipper real clean. Now you could just start out using a cutaway from the get-go, and that's if you don't mind cutting away at the zipper, and that's kind of hard to do. You don't want to use a wash away because you might leave some in, you might not be able to get it all out, and then if the purse got wet and then it'll become sticky, and you know, you don't want to use wash away. So either tear away or cut away. So I'm using tear away. I'm starting out with tear away, and then I'm going to tear some of it away and replace some of it with cut away. So I'm going to kind of do my own thing on this, and you can decide on what you like. The other supplies you might want to use are grommets, and that's if you wanted to put a grommet here and here, you would do that at the very end. You'd punch a hole with your hole punch right there and there, right through, and then you'd place your grommets. And you know, a lot of people like that. I have both types of grommets, the ones that you press and then also the ones that you dial in. So and then if you want to put rivets, you can decorate this purse with rivets. You can decorate here, anywhere with rivets. I just decorated the pull. And you can use batting if you want to put batting underneath this design to make it pop a little more with the quilting. And you can also interface, you know, you could put interfacing on now from the get-go if you want it to be stiff right away. I didn't. So, and plus, if you were, say, not going to use any of this design at all, and you were going to put your own design in, and maybe your design was really dense, then maybe you would want to put an iron-on the back. If you were using cotton, you'd put an iron-on. Just the sky's the limit on this. It all depends on what your choice is of fabric, what your preferences are, and the density of your design. So anyway, so that's the supplies. And so starting with number 1 on the instructions, it says optional, quilt the large outer back piece and or pocket. So if you wanted to quilt this outer back piece, you would be hooping that either before or after you do the tabs. It doesn't matter. So you would, you know, hoop your large outer piece with your batting underneath it. I probably still would use, I would probably hoop a poly mesh cutaway and then sandwich the batting in between these two and make like a quilt sandwich. That's the way I would do it. But I don't have a quilted design for the back. I guess if somebody wanted one, you could request one from me. I have them, you know, in my computer, so. But we're not going to quilt the back, so we're going to leave it. But if you wanted to, you could. And you could also quilt a pocket or do a design of a pocket. So say you wanted to put a pocket on this purse. Let me just grab a piece of fabric. I know this probably isn't the right size, but well, it might be if you wanted a short pocket. But if you did want to put a pocket on, you would just be folding the pocket and you'd be placing it at a certain point in our design, in our, you know, as we go. But if you were going to embroider the pocket, you would embroider it you'd find the halfway mark where you're going to fold, and you would embroider, say, the bottom. So like, and you could, you know, float it or hoop it or whatever. So say this is your embroidery design on your pocket. Your design would go at the bottom half. Then after you're done embroidering your design, you would fold it. Now maybe you wanted to quilt the design, in which case you'd make your quilt sandwich, you'd quilt it down here, and then you would take it out of the hoop, and then you would fold it, and then that would be your pocket. And then I have instructions on when you put this in. So that's an option. We're not going to do that either. We're just going to do a real simple purse. So that would be optional. And then number 2 is also optional, but we are doing it, and that's stitch your leather or vinyl tabs. So it says see file leather tabs.jef or whatever format you use. So it says to wash or hoop wash away stabilizer for the leather vinyl tabs. And so that's what we did. And then it says to stitch the placement stitches. So I'm going to put this in the hoop, and I'm going to stitch the placement stitches. Okay, so I thought I would show you in case, you know, there might be somebody who doesn't know how to set up your machine. So I pulled up the file for the leather tabs. Well, to pull up the file, I should show you, it's this button right here, open folder, pull something out of a folder. You'd hit that. Mine was on my USB stick, so you'd hit USB. And mine is under T. These are all my folders on my USB. And I'm going backwards because it's quicker. Here's my T. And mine is the next page, so this is the next page. And there's my leather tabs. And so now here's the design, and it's showing that the first color is being stitched by needle number 1. I'm fine with that because it's just a placement stitch, and I have orange thread in needle number 1, so I'm going to leave it. But I'm going to hit this arrow so I can assign it all, you know, everything a little bit more detailed, because I want to have that stop as well. So I'm going to hit my arrow here to go into my needles up here to program each needle, is this button here. And then you could see it's highlighted, and yes, I'm going to have needle number 1, stitch color number 1, but I want it to stop. So the red needle here will make it stop, so it'll turn red. So there's a stop there, and then I could put my leather tabs on, and then I'll go use my down arrow up here to go down to color number 2. And then color number 2 is actually going to stitch the lines for my leather tabs. And I'm going to use my black nylon thread for my leather. I usually like to use that, and I have that on needle number 3. So I'm going to change this from 2 to 3. And then I don't have to worry about the color stop because it's my last color. So I'm going to hit this arrow here to go back. And I'm going to go back again. And now I'm at the beginning. And it's going to stitch my placement lines. And incidentally, I use, when I stitch on leather, it's a straight stitch, so it's just, you know, a nice single stitching, and it's like 3 millimeters in stitch length. I don't want my bobbin thread to be tight, and because it's totally different when you're stitching a straight line of stitching, whether it's leather, nylon, or anything. When you're stitching a straight line and you want it, and it's going to show on both sides, you don't want the bobbin to look like railroad tracks. You don't want it to be tight, so you want to loosen your bobbin case. So I have an extra bobbin case just for that purpose, and I have a toe gauge, and I set my toe gauge when I put that bobbin, when I put the bobbin in here, I set the toe gauge to be at 80. That's pretty low. That's really low. That's very loose. But that's what I want for straight stitching. And then my top tension is really tight because I want the top to pull that bobbin up, and so that the two threads meet in the middle, you know, just like a sewing machine would. So my top, like normally on a Janome, everybody's like, oh, I use 5, or I use 4, or I use 5.5. Well, I kind of usually use about a 5. It depends, like if it's a t-shirt fabric or something delicate, I guess I'll use about a 5 or 4.5 or 5. Sometimes I go to 5.5 if I see it's a really dense design. So with this now, with the leather and the straight stitching, when I really want that top thread to pull that bobbin thread up, I have it set at 6.5. So that should make a pretty nice looking stitch. Even though we're not going to really see the bottom of this, we're not going to see the suede part, I still do it because you have to really pull. You're stitching on leather, and you really have to, you know, pull really well. And plus this is nylon thread, and it's coated and it's slippery, and so, you know, you got to clean your discs out with the alcohol all the time. So you do have to make it tighter for that reason as well. So, and then I buy my thread, my nylon thread from Wawak Sewing, WAWAK.com. And the top thread is a number 33 nylon, and the bobbin thread is a number 15 nylon. And my needle that I'm using is a number 16 sharp. I never use a leather needle when I'm embroidering. I guess you could use one if you're doing straight stitching, because you're not going back over, you know, a previous hole or anything, but it's not really necessary. And, you know, because those leather needles, they make a slice. So I don't have any leather needles for my embroidery machine, even when I work on leather. And especially if you're doing a design on leather, you do not want to use a leather needle, because as you go back over a previous area, when that leather needle comes down, it's like a knife, you know, it'll cut your threads that you previously laid down. So I use a number 16 just because I feel that the thread slides really good with the 16. I do have 14 that I probably could use with this number 33, and I might try that. I haven't tried it yet. So, but at any rate, so we'll go ahead and we will stitch the placement lines. Okay. And you know, like everybody says, you should do a trace. So I'm going to do a trace, and it's tracing with the first needle, needle number 1. always want to wait, you know, because you never know, you might not have hit the red button for it to stop, so you don't want to get your fingers in there. So my first two are thicker, so I'm gonna just place them on there, and I'm going to use these first two for my top tabs, because you know they're gonna hold the weight of the purse. And they don't have to be on perfectly because we're gonna be trimming them. So, and I don't really even have to tape them. And if you are going to tape them, you can tape the long sides, because the long sides, there's not going to be any stitching there, as long as you don't go in too far. And even if I put it here, I should be okay with this thin thread, maybe. And then these are my thinner pieces, although these are prettier. It's like, oh well, that's all I got. I repurpose my leather, so I just buy used leather coats at Goodwill, and then I wash them with leather soap, and that's how I repurpose them. And then, so now I'll just get my chopstick, and we will stitch the number 3 now. We'll stitch the top stitching. That one might be a little close. That might be a little close. I'll just take that off. Okay, so these are going to be trimmed. These outer edges are going to be trimmed to 1/8 of an inch. I'll just use this, and I'll be trimming then to 1/8. So I'm going to line up the 1/8 inch mark on this outer line. This one is frosted on the edges, but the Olfa rulers are even better for that. And I'll just go all the way down a little bit. So we'll go ahead under warm water, and we'll just rinse the backs of these, and I'll pat them dry and then let them dry on a towel while I'm working on the rest of the purse. Save my strips, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I'm going to hoop. So I have my tabs drying because they're all washed off and whatnot. So here's my hoop, and this is that new hoop. And if I have to do a review right now with using the stitch and tear, I would say it's not a very strong hoop, but stitch and tear is really hard to get tight anyways. So I'm going to hold off on my somewhat mean review of this hoop. These are those cheaper hoops for like 59 bucks for all 3. So, but I did put the masking tape on the bottom, you know, of each edge. So then this is sticky, and this is sticky. And I tried to already hoop it once and it didn't work, so I had to put the masking tape on and I ripped it. So what I would do with my other hoop is I would put my stabilizer on, I have to move that a little, put my fingers in the center, push out. That's if I'm, you know, well, even if I am going to hoop fabric, I still do this. So I'll push out and have it stick to the masking tape, and then push this way. See, that's why I don't like the stitch and tear, the traditional. It is really, it's so stiff, but some people like it for, you know, the applique and really dense designs and that. So, and then normally what I would do after this, before I would hoop it, I would take it around to the side, I would turn it over, and I would tape, put a piece of tape in each corner, and then I would hoop my fabric. But I don't have to worry about this with an in the hoop design. I can just play with it like this. So, and I'll just this in. So then I'll press this down before I tighten or recess anything, and I'll tighten it then, and then I'll recess my hoop each corner, and then it should be, it's drum tight now. And that's only because of the tape. It wasn't drum tight with this stitch and tear before I put this tape. So, oh well. It's still nice. It's a new hoop. And it was cheap. Not spending 180 bucks for one hoop. So, so it's hooped. So rehoop using one of the stabilizers. Stitch the placement lines for the zipper with the pull on the left. Okay. So this is you looking at it. It's going to stitch the placement lines for the zipper. So I'll go put it in the machine.